Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to our RBT training. So, today we are going to discuss autism. Exactly what autism is, how we diagnose autism, some things that may be contributing factors to why there is a seeming rise or increase in the number of children being diagnosed with autism, and then exactly how autism affects the brain. It's going to be beneficial for you to have an understanding of this because it'll help you better understand why we use and implement certain teaching practices. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking a little bit about exactly what autism is. And now I know that not all of you that are going to be taking this training deal directly with the autistic population, but for the most part, you're going to contact an individual or a child within your workplace that does have autism if you don't directly work with them, okay? And as you go forward in your career, a lot of applied behavioral analysis is directly going to help support those individuals with special needs, but most specifically autism, because of the way that their brain works. And that's why we use applied behavioral analysis to specifically teach those crucial skills. So let's go forward with this. What is autism? Autism is a disorder of neural development characterized by impaired social interaction and communication, and by restricted and repetitive behavior. The diagnostic criteria requires that symptoms become apparent before a child is 3 years of age. Autism affects important information processing in the brain by altering how nerve cells and their synapses connect and are organized. How this occurs is still not really well understood, but we are going to talk a little bit more about this after we sum up exactly what autism is. So, it's one of the 3 recognized disorders in the autism spectrum disorders. The other 2 being Asperger's, which lacks delay in cognitive development and language, and pervasive development disorder, which is not otherwise specified, okay? So what really sets Asperger's apart from autism is that autistic children typically have unusually high interests or perseverate in a certain area. They'll also have some stereotypical movements sometimes, whereas Asperger's is really more along the social realm of disorders, okay? If you want more information on exactly what autism is, I urge you to take a peek at the DSM-5. The DSM-5 as a whole is a book that provides information on how to, or what qualifies an individual as meeting criteria for different diagnoses, okay? So within there, it's going to show you that criteria. I'm going to provide some sample information on our course site, so make sure that you take a peek at that as well. Otherwise, Autism Speaks has some great resources. We're going to talk a little bit about that after we discuss exactly how autism affects the brain. But first, let's kind of jump into that. So, let's talk about autism and what's occurring in our brain in association to that. New research is kind of challenging beliefs that autism only affected certain parts of the brain, whether it was the social realm or the reasoning realm. But current research is kind of showing that autism affects the entire brain as a whole, okay? It affects the ability for different parts of the brain to work together and send electrical impulses from one neuron to the next neuron to the next neuron, okay? So let's break it down into its most simplest form. Let's talk about a neuron. I'm sure all of you can remember back to those basic biology days when you were talking about how our body communicates, our brain to our feet, the words that come out of our mouth. Those are all told to do something regarding based upon how our brain is sending electrical impulses from one neuron to the other, almost like bridges all the way through until it meets a certain part of our body and it sends off information and it says, yep, you're supposed to do this. And that's why, right now my brain is firing through into my hand and it's telling it to do these crazy hand movements, okay? Because I like to talk a lot with my hands. But that's all part of the electrical impulses that go through in the bridging network. But with our children with autism, that's not necessarily occurring. Those bridges are broken, right? So I think the longest neuron is somewhere along your backbone, okay? And it can be multiple feet long, whereas the tiniest is itty bitty, and you almost need a microscope to be able to see it within our brain. So depending on where that neuron is affected, it might affect the ability for certain parts of your brain to communicate towards one another. So let's draw a neuron up here. We're going to go back to kind of Bio 101. All right, so I'm going to draw what kind of looks like a stem. Okay. This piece right here is called the axon. At one end of our axon, we have something that kind of looks like roots. And these are called synapses. Okay, there's probably a lot more synapses than that, but I'm going to stop there, all right? So these are called synapses. All right, at the other end, we have something that kind of looks similar to a tree branch, okay? And these are going to be called dendrites. All right, so these are called dendrites. Right here in the middle, this is the neuron, the brain of your whole neuron here, the neuron cell. Okay? So, now, attached to our dendrites, well, they're not attached, but next to our dendrites are going to be a variety of other synapses that are coming in from other axons, okay, or other neurons. So, and this is how our bridge is created. So this is a previous neuron over here, okay, and now we've got these synapses that are coming in from other neurons. Some of them might not be this close, but some of them may. And then over here on this side, we're going to have a variety of other neurons too. Okay, but instead, these are going to be the dendrites from other neurons. And so what happens is these dendrites, okay, let's take our big one first. So we've got our neuron cell body. We've got a chemical impulse that says, hey, you're supposed to fire. This neuron sends a signal and it fires an electrical current that typically starts from another neuron, okay? This electrical current, I'm going to do this in a different color. Green. Okay, this electrical current goes through our axon, comes all the way out here to the dendrites, and then the dendrite fires out a chemical, okay? And then this chemical will eventually make its way down to another dendrite over here, send out chemical impulses, okay? These chemicals will get fired and travel all the way until they fit into one of these synapses, almost like a key, okay? So when this chemical impulse hits that synapse, it says, yep, okay, you need to fire. Then there's an electrical current that goes all the way through, comes into our neuron cell body. This activates the neuron cell body, which then again sends an impulse that says, all right, I've got to send out more chemical impulses, right? And then these get fired off along our dendrites again, and then connect up to other synapses from other neurons. And this process continues all the way through our body until the communication finally reaches the destination it was set out to do. So this is essentially how communication occurs in our brain and throughout our body. Now getting to the autistic piece, okay? Around this axon, there's something called a myelin sheath. Myelin sheath is something similar to bubble wrap or some sort of foam that goes around the outside of a pipe. Its primary purpose is to insulate the axon, and it acts as a conductor, making the electrical current more easy to follow through and flow through to the next neuron. However, individuals with autism, some research is showing that this myelin sheath that surrounds the outside of this, right, and is its conductor, actually grows in excess. There's some cell that's mutated that tells it to keep growing, and it doesn't stop until it gets so big that it actually squishes the axon. And the electrical impulse can't follow through. And so this is why there's a lot of documented reporting of children who reach the age of 2 or 3 and then all of a sudden seemingly lose language, all right? And that's part of what helps support this hypothesis, is that the axon is growing too much and starts to decrease the ability for their brain to communicate, or for the synapses and axons to communicate. So it's an interesting theory. We'll see what more research provides in the future, but it's a neat start. So this kind of brings us into our next piece, which talks about